Today we're talking about Cycle 9 of the Animorphs book series, which includes books 41 through to 46. Now, in the midst of these books, I also read the Elemist Chronicles, but as I found out whilst reading it, it actually should take place after, or should be read after 47. But it sort of fits anywhere in that region. So I'm going to leave it out of this particular review and just concentrate on these 6 here. So let's cover the scores of each of these individually. So from left to right, the Familiar 10 out of 10, the Journey 1 out of 10, the Test 8 out of 10, the Unexpected 8 out of 10, the Revelation 3 out of 10, and the Deception 5 out of 10. Overall, that comes to an average score of 5.8, which is really low. I believe it's actually the lowest ranked. But, I almost want to pretend that the Journey doesn't exist, because it certainly doesn't exist plot-wise between these. And if you took the Journey out, which I shall, the actual score, average score, is 6.8, which is not great, but it's not too terrible either. Just briefly to cover this one before it's gone for good. Character development, Rachel, no. She's barely in her own book. In fact, for half the time it's Marco narrating it. The plot's all over the place. It doesn't do anything for the main plot. It's just the Helmicrons coming back and being more annoying than usual. That's about all you can say for this book. It's so bad that it doesn't even have the worst moment in this particular run of books. It doesn't even have that honour. So from now, let's just concentrate on these 5. Let's talk about the big plot going through this stream. And I think that there are 2 major parts to this. 1, gearing up the characters for that final push. These 3 books here, the Familiar, the Tests, and the Unexpected, putting certain characters in position. It largely revolves, in those 3 books, and to an extent in these ones as well, how far will you go to achieve your goals? That is the big theme throughout this run of books. It's very prevalent, and it starts with the Familiar, where Jake makes the decision to either press the abort button and let Cassie fall out the window, or save Cassie and let the Candrona thing go off. And we can imply from other stuff that happens in this that Jake chose to press the abort button to do the bigger picture option rather than save those close to him. Similar sort of thing in the Test with Tobias. Largely though, it revolves around Cassie. In fact, these 3 books all have big Cassie moments in them. Obviously, The Unexpected is narrated by Cassie and comes around her a lot. But she certainly sees the most development out of all the characters in this particular run of books. In this first one, she has that big breakdown at the start. Massive breakdown. And large parts of Jake's dream is all about what's happened to Cassie and what will become of her if they carry on with the route they're going. In the Test, she decides that she doesn't want to take part in the mission. That mission being to basically destroy the entire Yeerk pool, which again comes down to that, how big do you want to go before you turn around and say, hold on, we're actually going to take a step back and not take this drastic course of action. In the Unexpected, Cassie sort of does a bit of a turn. She's always been, oh, we shouldn't do that, we shouldn't do this because we got to keep our principles. By the end of that book, she's almost come around to the idea that, for example, she morphs a Hawk Bajir, even though she normally wouldn't, because she feels, right, I'm going to make this sacrifice, but I'm going to do what I can and give this Hawk Bajir as much respect as they can and let them do something good. Because if I don't do it, the bad thing's going to happen anyway, regardless of whether I do it or not, or do thing A or not. So that's the big part of that, and largely revolves around Cassie. So she's certainly had the biggest plot development, character development throughout this run. Then once we get into these 2 books here, the countdown to the big final push starts essentially. Unfortunately, I mean, there are so many big plot points that I feel it was rushed into it. Like, there's not many big plot points in these. They're really good at setting up these characters into that position where they can go into that final stretch. But when it gets to especially 45, there are so many massive plot points and so few pages that it just seems rushed, illogical, and it really dampens those moments, whereas otherwise there have been really big moments. I felt really let down by it. But yeah, we do get that big moment where Marco now has to fake his own death because he saved his father from infestation, so he's faked his own death as well. He's gone to live the Hork-Bajir. Marco decides that he lives in 3 places at once: Axis Scoop, Sheeland, and the Hork-Bajir Valley. For more on that, watch the reviews. Visser 1 is dead, which means somewhere between these 2 books, Visser 3 is now Visser 1, which is going to get confusing in my future reviews as I'm referring to him. And now he's got the blue band army behind him, these massive bulking Hork-Bajir with the blue bands on their arms. And in that last one there, the military must surely now know about the Yeerk invasion. And that is huge. So the next cycle of books is basically the open war. The next cycle. And this all leads up to that, placing the characters in the positions, feeding them that little bit of how far will you go, what big decisions will you make. That's what these first 3 are about, leading up to the ending bit. Let's talk about individual characters. Jake. He's usually been one of the characters with the most development. I wouldn't say he has that much development here in the Familiar. He has quite a bit because we get to see how far he'll go, what sort of decisions he'll make. And up until that point, he hasn't had to make such big, massive decisions. It's only now that he's starting to do the genocidal sort of decisions, right? And will he let the ones he loves perish? Which of course comes relevant into the future. So he's at the peak of decision making as of this book. Rachel, no character development. Her book's down there for a reason. She's literally, you could say, in the Deception, that she was noticeably more gung-ho, even more so than usual. Oh, we're going to take human morphs. Whereas every other time in the series, they've been sort of like edgy about it. She's just like, yeah, let's do it. And it's a bit like, okay, chill out. That's it for Rachel's development. She's just becoming a physical embodiment of she's just becoming a battering ram. That's all you can describe her as, really. Tobias. Tobias is still an interesting one, and one I still quite haven't figured out. And I don't think he's figured himself out as well. And I think that's his character. He hasn't quite figured himself out. But again, he's also been questioning, how far will I go? What will I do? What will I not do? And it was unusual, really, because in this one, he didn't want to do this particular action, but so did the other Animorphs. And then in the Deception, at the very end, they decide to go ahead with it, which is a bit strange. We see Tobias as becoming very selfless, essentially, especially in this book, especially at the start with the Bobby McIntyre kid. And further down the line, it's more sort of about the reason I've turned myself into a Hawk deliberately, which we find out in this book. Lose my train of thought here. So he turned himself into a Hawk because he couldn't take the world as it was and he just wanted an escape. And now he's coming to the conclusion of, I should be thinking more about other people than just hiding away in, for example, my morph. Just hiding away. I've got to help. Even if I can't help myself, I need to help other people. And that was quite a nice little turn for Tobias, so I quite like that. We've already discussed Cassie. Is there anything else I need to talk about with her? Not necessarily. She's just come after 38, book 38, where I thought she was turning away. And we saw more of it, where she's starting to back out of missions here. This is where she came back to the fold. And she had a little self-reflection and came to the conclusion that, yes, she does need to continue this fight. Because if she didn't, then it would be just as bad, if not worse. Marco. We've not seen that much development with Marco. The only thing I can really say is that he's becoming very hypocritical. For example, he'll talk to his father and say, nothing is right or wrong anymore, and then he'll go talk about what is right or wrong. But part of me thinks, is he saying nothing's right or wrong just to convince other people? Because he thinks convincing them that there's nothing right or wrong will get them to do what needs to be done. That's a very strange thing, but it's almost manipulative, what Marco does. He's got a manipulative side to him now, that even if he thinks something's right or wrong, he will say what needs to be said in order to get people to do what is right or wrong, depending on the situation. Which is, a strange term, but it's not that much different to what we know. A little bit of development. And Axe, that's a strange one. He's betrayed the team, essentially, especially Jake. Whacked Jake out unconscious in order to rush to a decision that he thought was best. That's dramatic. And I don't want to jump to a conclusion now, because I think we'll see more of this coming out in the next cycle. But that is a strange turn, and I'm interested to see where that goes. Because at the start of that book, he almost got his ties cut with the Andalites when they said, we're not going to listen to you. Axe has already said, my duty is for my prince. So he tied himself to Jake, and now at the end of this, he's cut the tie with Jake, essentially. So I think he's essentially going solo. He's trying to take actions into his own hands. He thinks, you know, he can't trust either groups wholly, so he's going to go off on his own, which is, I don't know. When I eventually do a character analysis for Axe, it's going to be an interesting point of discussion. I'm not sure if I think it's reasonable or not. I suppose we'll see as we get through the next cycle. Little factoids now. Best book, obviously The Familiar. Worst book, The Journey, no doubt. Best and worst cover. Right, best cover I put as The Test, with the hawk going to Taxon. So if I bring it up closer for you there. With the new Tobias in the background, the one with blonde hair. But it's nice to see a Taxon on the front cover, because we hardly ever see them. That's the best cover. And the worst cover is The Revelation. Why is it The Revelation? It's not so much about what's on the front. It's the fact that he's morphing an ant. And if you read this book, you know that he never actually fully becomes ant. He sort of goes halfway into ant morph just to show his dad, and that's it. So why is the ant on the front as if it's the main morph of the book? It just doesn't really make sense, and that puts me off, and that's why it's the worst cover. Apart from that, they're all pretty all right. There's no complete goppers in here. What is the worst moment out of all of these books? Not in The Journey, because The Journey was just below average on everything, but not completely disastrous in a single thing. The worst moment in these books comes from The Deception. And that is where Axe is in the command centre of the ship, and he wants to disable or incapacitate Visser 2. So he walks to a Marine, basically pulls the weapon from the Marine and shoots Carrington in the leg. And now if you want to see why that's bullshit, I list the various reasons in my review. But that moment was absolutely horrendous. And that was book 37 levels of shit. That was awful. I hated that moment. Let's leave on a high note. What's the best moment in this run? And there were a couple of moments, actually. A couple. One of them was, honorary mentions go to Cassie saying that she won't do the mission in book 43. But all the best moments here are Cassie, really, because the one I chose the best moment was from The Familiar. At the very start of the book, that whole first couple of chapters with the big busting into this place and a really, really tight and awful battle, and where Cassie breaks down in the middle of the road and she just cannot move, and how she responds after that. I thought that was brilliant. Really, really good. Not one of the best moments of the entire series, but certainly top 10, I would think, at this point. I've still got another cycle to go yet. So anyway, that's that particular cycle. Most of them anyway, the other one's down there. Not particularly bad, and I think it puts us in a pretty good position for the next cycle coming. I just hope that it's not as rushed as these two books were. I hope now that we've got the boom, big moments from those out of the way, we can take the next 8 books at a reasonable pace so that it's not rushed and illogical. That's what I'm hoping for the next cycle, and I'm hoping it's going to be good. The next cycle will be books 47 through to 52, and then of course there's the last 2 books. I don't think I'll put them in that cycle. I'll probably just do like a final video for those 2, if that makes sense. So that's that. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you for the next review. Ta-ra!